morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get started with our council session. Our first item would be an invocation, as we always begin our sessions. So we have Father Abuka from the Holy Redeemer Catholic Church in Kensington. Please rise as you're able.
Let us pray. Dear God, we thank you for the gift of our humanity and for the gift of civil governance. We thank you for the people of Montgomery County, the rich and the poor, and in a special way the men and women of this council. We pray that you bless them with wisdom, insight, and courage with which they can serve the common good of our community. May they be mindful of all people, especially of the poor and those in the margins of society, and may their governing efforts bear fruit for the progress of all in our community. In your name we pray. Amen.
So our first item of business is the election of officers, and since I'm concluding my term as council president today, one of my last acts will be to we'll be sparing the group from a long-winded speech because actually we as a team have worked so very hard this year that I figure we better summarize all of this in a video. However, I do want to take a moment to thank those in my life who have made this year extremely rewarding. First and foremost, of course, I have to thank my incredible family who has put up with me this year regarding my very hectic schedule and very long nights tracking a lot of issues, and they've always been there supporting me along the way. Also, my council colleagues, you guys have all been extraordinary, especially in this very unique and historic year of transition. Each of you have brought your own ideas, priorities, and passion for public service to the council, and it has really invigorated the council as an institution. I'm extremely proud of what we were able to achieve together, as well as very proud of what our community has done to participate in this process. Also, throughout my council presidency, I was fortunate to work extensively with this amazing and remarkable community here in Montgomery County, many advocates and community organizations on everything from racial equity and social justice to community policing, economic development, and so much more. Since I will inevitably leave someone out, I will just say, you know who you are, and I appreciate you. Truly, truly do appreciate you, because this is a county with extraordinary and amazing people who participate and are involved and are so well informed. I want to thank the council's entire central staff, led by Executive Director Marlene Michelson, and our Office of Legislative Oversight staff, led by Director Chris Seelar, the Clerk's Office, Legislative Information Services, and Legislative Information Office. I want to extend a warm welcome to our new clerk, Selena Mendy-Singleton, and thank Linda Lauer for agreeing to come back to us on a limited engagement, but boy, was it really important and supportive. I also want to thank my amazing work family. They are truly an outstanding team. Ikhaid Roland Ikeloa, Berta Cersosimo, Craig Wilson, Ben Price, and Mayra Cruz Solis. I wouldn't have made it through this year without you, for real. There is so much work that goes on behind the scenes that no one truly appreciates until your staff, the council president's office, really, truly get into the thick of it. Each of you conquered every challenge that was placed before you and helped make my work life extremely fulfilling. Thank you for all your hard work and dedication, and for not running to the hills and leaving me alone. All right, now let's roll the tape that our amazing communication office, led by Sonia Healy, has put together for us. My promise is to build upon the work of the leaders before me and to extend the conversation and direct the work in new, equitable ways to reflect the needs of our changed county. My priority is to make sure that our work as a body is seamless, productive, and accountable to our residents. 2019 was a year of change for our county. 4 new council members and a new executive. Congratulations. I led this council at a time of immense change, and I'm proud and humbled to say that I met this challenge head on. My 2019 presidency kicked off with a year-long goal to introduce and adopt a racial equity and social justice legislation to institutionalize the norms of racial equity and social justice into the work of county government. After several county-wide community conversations, the council took the input from residents and incorporated them into the Racial Equity and Social Justice Bill.
Not just education of the youth, but also of adults. The possibility of offering after-school classes for any community member, just on how to approach people of different races and building that greater acceptance within the community, but not just focusing on children.
The bill creates a new Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice in the executive branch, which will put in place parameters the council and executive can use to measure progress. An advisory committee made up of public members who are compensated was also created. I am convinced that unless we have a framework and unless we have legislation that mandates us to look at the data carefully and really truly consider and have deliberations that look at whether our decisions are going to exacerbate or whether they are going to close these disparities, we will be here 30 years from now. The bill also requires the Montgomery County Planning Board to consider racial equity and social justice issues when preparing master plans such as land use, transportation, and public facilities that are submitted to the council. Additional enacted legislation that furthers racial equity is the Crown Act, which I was proud to co-sponsor with Councilmember Will Jawando. The bill protects natural hairstyles such as braids, locks, afros, curls, and twists from discrimination. The Crown Act allows individuals who are discriminated against because of the appearance of their natural hair to seek a civil penalty of up to $5,000. The bill not only covers discrimination in employment, but also in public accommodations, taxi services, admissions to group homes, and cable services. Wonderful. Well, there goes the budget. Okay. Yay! Budget time was particularly a busy time for all of us. Whew. Shepherding the council through this process is one of the main responsibilities of the council president. We unanimously approved the county's $5.8 billion budget for FY 2020. The council also funded the Board of Education's nearly $3 billion request. The 2020 budget held the line on taxes and increases reserves to the targeted 10%. At the end of the day, a budget isn't just about dollars and cents. A budget reflects the values of a community. I am proud to say that the fiscal year 2020 budget lights the flame for a bright fiscal future that will benefit Montgomery County and its residents in a manner that is fair and equitable for all. As the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Chair, I'm especially proud that during my tenure, the county was able to maintain our AAA bond rating for the 46th consecutive year, the longest held by any county in the United States. An area of great significance during my presidency was the relationship between the police and the community it serves. The Community Policing Bill that I introduced along with Councilmember Craig Rice aims to provide guidelines for police department to employ and promote core community policing values among officers. It also requires the Montgomery County Police Department provide an annual report on workforce diversity, community engagement activities, the number of complaints filed against officers, officer suspensions, and other data. The United States is the only developed nation with a growing aging population and a young population. This young population is socioeconomically, racially, and ethnically diverse and disproportionately affected by an opportunity gap that leads to an academic achievement gap. To maintain our competitive edge as a nation and ensure that our workforce is prepared for the rapidly evolving job market, we must be strategic and invest in the early years. It is the best return on investment and prepares all of our children. It is the great equalizer. To that end, I authored a framework that created the Montgomery County Early Care and Education Initiative, a $7 million investment to provide access to a top and quality early education. And we hope to be able to repeat the $7 million investment for the next 4 years. As part of the initiative, a second early childhood education center in Gaithersburg opened its door this fall.
Since my son started here, I've saw great improvement in his speech, for one. So I have been very happy. And he's coming home telling me all the sorts of things that he's been doing.
We continue to make strategic investments to bring new jobs to the county and strengthen our tax base for years to come by investing in all corners of the county. Wheaton is a prime example. The community eagerly welcomed the opening of the new Wheaton Library and Community Recreation Center, a $70 million investment nestled between the Wheaton and Glenmont communities. This 21st century amenity now also includes increased and strengthened senior services to serve our aging population, thanks to the special appropriation that I introduced and the full council unanimously supported. During my presidency, the council also approved the Veers Mill Corridor Master Plan, which seeks to enhance pedestrian and traffic safety on that busy road, improve public transportation choices for residents, and increase the number of affordable housing units in the area. Another of my proudest moments was the unanimous adoption of my resolution to support the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments' regional housing targets for Montgomery County. The target for the county is 41,000 units, and I am confident that we will be able to achieve this goal by the year 2030. Housing is a critical component of our economic development strategy, especially when it's located in our activity centers. On that note, I also introduced the council's own economic development platform, which outlines a plan to make Montgomery County an attractive place for new businesses. Through business development, housing, transportation, and workforce development, the plan hopes to grow the tax base through economic incentives. I also oversaw 20 appointments, including some notable firsts. Partap Verma, the first Asian Indian and openly gay member of the Planning Board, Megan Davy Limarzi became the first female Inspector General, and Angela Talley is the first female African American to lead the Department of Corrections. After months of a long search, the council confirmed Acting Police Chief Marcus Jones to the permanent post. This year, I was honored to be named by Washingtonian Magazine as one of their 150 most powerful women in the D.C. area. This is the second time that I have been recognized by the magazine for that distinction. I was recognized in the local politics and government category among some very notable women. As the first Latina immigrant to be elected to the Montgomery County Council, I feel honored every day to be leading an energetic and focused legislative body. We have been inclusive in our work while also having some fun. Hey, we even dance salsa in this chamber. 2019 was a year of many firsts under my presidency. From my racial equity legislation to my economic development platform, I have set in place actionable and measurable systems to make sure Montgomery County is always moving forward. We ensured accountability through structural reform in the Office of the Inspector General and audited the staffing and management structure of the County Council so that our institutions are appropriate and responsive for today's diverse constituency. Thank you to each one of my council colleagues for the opportunity to lead us through such a transformational year. That was amazing. I had not seen the video, so that was a really cool surprise. Good job, good job. All right, so our next item will be to elect the new president and vice president. So with that, I call for nominations for council president. And I have a light, Councilor Merle Bornoz. Is that for you? Is that?
Madam President, before we move on to this
okay.
important item, I just wanted to not miss this opportunity to thank you for your commitment and leadership through this entire year. You have led us steadily. I met you for the first time 15 years ago in the Starbucks on Rockville Pike, and I was impressed then and continue to be impressed by how great a role model you are. And this year in particular, you ate calm for breakfast, cool for lunch, collected for dinner, and for dessert got an extra helping of wisdom and strength. So I want to thank you for your leadership and thank you for your friendship. Gracias.
I appreciate that so much. All right. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. And again, I echo those sentiments of your great leadership. I've had an opportunity to work with you alongside you for 9 years now, and it's been a whirlwind. And it's a whirlwind because we continue to change the world. Something that I continue to tell children about how they can change the world and make a difference in everybody's life. And you've truly done that and should be so proud. Your family should be so proud of all the great things that you've done for this community. So thank you for that.
Appreciate that so much.
So along those lines, we need to continue the great work. And I'd like to put forth a nomination for president. And this person is certainly one who embodies something that we need right now. Understanding that on our national stage, we continue to have people trying to tear us apart. We also have people here locally trying to do the same thing. But there are a lot of people who fortunately understand that the only way in which we can succeed as a community is by bringing us all together. This is a man who has dedicated himself to service, who understands that bringing more folks to the discussion, especially those who may not even want to be a part, is incredibly important. He understands that we need to have everybody's voice at the table. He understands about the need to educate all of our community and making sure that they understand the workings of government and how they can play a role in having an impact. He wants to make sure that they understand that although they may not know the answers lie directly with them and what's in their heart. He believes in showing up for other people's struggles. He believes in fighting for others, understanding that they may not have received the same sort of blessings that he may have received. And he wants to have good, honest discussions and open, frank conversations about how we can make our community better and how we can all work together. And he acknowledges that although some of those struggles may be not ones that he experiences, he embraces them and understands that the experiences of others are also shared experiences that we must also embody and tackle, and understand that the challenges that face others are also ones that truly face all of us if we are to make ourselves a better place. Now, I'm a big believer in institutional wisdom, and certainly this person has a lot of it. He also has a lot of institutional puns, and so hopefully he'll keep those to himself and spare us some of those. But in all seriousness, if you understand your history, it makes it a lot easier for you to know where to go. And this person certainly has a great history here in Montgomery County, has done a lot of great work in dedicating himself to his community, and I know is going to do a great job as our next council president. Above all else, people who know me know that I care about people's hearts. And this man has a truly genuine heart. He has a kind soul, he cares about people, and it's indicative of all the ways in which he's served our community. And so, Madam President, I'm honored to nominate Sidney Katz as our next president.
All right, is there a second? All right, lots of seconds. All those in favor of electing Council Vice President Sidney Katz to president for the next year, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. As you can tell, I learned years ago to vote for yourself, so I just did that. Thank you for those kind words, Greg. Next, we're going to be asking for the nomination for Vice President.
I like to.
Yes,
I don't have a
please.
light.
You don't have a light.
I would like to be
Please.
acknowledged. So it is my honor to nominate my friend and colleague Tom Hucker for Vice President of this council. Tom has served as a state delegate representing District 20 from 2007 to 2014. And then in 2014, he was elected to represent District 5 on the county council. He currently chairs the Transportation and Environment Committee and has been a great asset to the Public Safety Committee. And quite simply, He is known for getting the job done. In his 12 years of experience as an effective legislator, I believe that he has truly led the charge on an extraordinarily variety of policy issues. He has fought for the expansion of renters' rights, for voting accessibility, for the creation of green jobs, access to transportation, for common sense I-270 and I-495 expansion widening, for affordable housing, and the end of human trafficking. He's a strong supporter of education and a champion for small businesses in his district and other areas of the county. I believe that this combination of Council President Sidney Katz and our colleague Tom Hucker, it's a great, great team to lead us through this second year of transition. I think what Tom brings is a real pragmatic way of finding solutions to our most vexing problems, while reminding all of us that we have to be inclusive and make sure that every single voice is always taken into consideration. So with that, I can say that, again, it's my honor to nominate Tom Hucker, Councilmember Tom Hucker, for Vice President.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of Tom Hucker, Councilmember Tom Hucker, becoming the Vice President, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Congratulations. Immediate past president, this will be no surprise that we have a little gift for you. This is something that as your video has said, you had an extraordinary year. You've had an extraordinary elections of many, many years. And this plaque with the gavel says Nancy Navarro, President, Montgomery County Council, 2018 to 2019. And I can tell you this entire council is presenting this to you with a great amount of admiration and sincere love. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And now, my first act as president will be to call a recess. And it's only for 2 minutes so that we can have the beautiful ceremony of everybody changing chairs. Thank you very much. If we could please get started again, we are back in session. There is some changes here. Well, let me again thank Craig for nominating me to serve as president for the upcoming year, and I thank my colleagues for their confidence to elect me, and for your support as we together continue to work to make Montgomery County the best that it can be. I also want to take the moment and thank my wife Sally and their daughter Stephanie, who are in the audience, for their and our daughter Heather, who could not be here, and her son-in-law Clifton, for all their undying help and love along the way. Nobody can do this by themselves, and certainly my family has been there for me constantly. And I also want to take a moment and thank the CATS office, led by my Chief of Staff, Lisa Mandel-Trupp, and that includes Jackie and Mary and Laurie and Sam, for all of their help as well. I have thoroughly enjoyed my first 5 years on the council, and I'm especially looking forward to guiding the council during the next year. It's truly an honor to serve as your president. I want to be a positive leader, because with positive leadership, we can and will accomplish our shared goals. I know that these goals can be accomplished collaboratively with continuous, productive communication and with a willingness to challenge the status quo when and where we know we can do better. Our county is a vibrant and diverse and provides our residents with an outstanding school system as well as a superb quality of life. But there's always room for improvement. I will spend the next year continuing to work with businesses, to locate here and those that should locate here, so that we can expand and strengthen our economy. A growing economy is the foundation upon which we can all prosper. As we work to increase our tax base, we must seize every opportunity to demonstrate that we are a great place to do business, that we are welcoming, that our regulations and requirements are no more onerous than those in surrounding jurisdictions, and that we are responsive to the criticism we hear. I will continue to work with each of our public safety departments and all of our first responders to continue to ensure that they have the personnel, training, and equipment to safely serve our residents and guests. Our senior population is growing, and these folks add so much to our community, while at the same time presenting challenges that we must address. Montgomery County is home to many, many nonprofits. These groups, too numerous to name, provide safety net services that are vital to so many in our community. As we re-examine our grants process, we need to keep this in mind. We alone cannot do all that is needed, and we must support our nonprofit providers so that they can continue to support those in need. We face challenging times ahead. We need to do more with less. Our almost $6 billion annual budget must be spent judiciously. We will examine our departments, programs, personnel, and our capital investments so that we are confident that every dollar is being allocated to do the most good. We also face new and exciting times ahead. I welcome both the challenges and the excitement. I hope both to be a good leader and a good learner, so that together we can set a path forward that is constructive, productive, and responsive. As John F. Kennedy said, the pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. The leader adjusts the sails. Thank you very much for this honor. Council Vice President Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sounds good to say that. I just want to thank all of you for your confidence in me. I'm honored to serve as your Vice President for the coming year. I meant what I said in my Thanksgiving text to all of you about how grateful I am for the relationship I have with each one of you and the opportunity to serve together to do great things for the residents of the county. I already have received one text, unfortunately, that says, "Do comparisons to Mike Pence make you queasy?" So if that's how it begins, it might be a long year, Sydney. But seriously, I'm eager to support President Katz's initiatives in economic development and the safety net services and the adequate staffing for our first responders. We've worked together really well for the last 5 years on the Public Safety Committee, and I know we will continue to do that. And at the same time, as the chair of T&E, I will help lead this council toward our carbon reduction goals, toward our Vision Zero goals, and continue some initiatives I've been focused on for years of pushing for healthy housing for all, both in our neighborhoods and our rental housing, making sure DHCA meets its obligations for more frequent inspections and holding landlords accountable for violations. And I'm particularly grateful to President Navarro. We had a whirlwind year under your leadership with many initiatives. We're all very grateful, I know, for especially the Racial Equity and Social Justice Initiative. We've all talked about how much that means to us. You have done your job of getting that appropriately today on the county executive's desk for signing this afternoon, and now it's really up to all of us to make sure that that's a durable lens through which we're viewing all our policy and our budgetary decisions in the future. So I'm very excited about the year we've had. I'm looking forward to the future, and I'm hoping that the initiative that we led under your leadership this past year really becomes a model for the school system, for the college, for our nonprofit partners, and ultimately for the entire state of Maryland. So again, I'm grateful to all of you and looking very much forward to working with all of you in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, do we have any announcements or petitions?
Good morning, President Katz. We do not have any announcements. We have no petitions.
Very good. The minutes have been distributed for November 12th, 2019. Unless there are any corrections, they will be approved as received. Thank you. They are approved. Next is our consent calendar. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. And Councilmember Reamer, please.
Thank you, Council President Katz. Wanted to highlight an item I've been working on with Councilmember Friedson, which is item D, the special appropriation for a placemaking study in White Flint. Montgomery County has a very expansive vision of economic development in the 355 corridor and countywide. We really need to make that entire corridor an economic engine for the county, just as some nodes are today. We need to really build a linear city up and down the pike and create an engine that can drive our success and our prosperity. There is a real mismatch between a vision of an urban area where companies want to be and what you see when you're on the ground in White Flint today. And that is because the suburban highway that we built decades ago to serve large shopping malls is still there, and it hasn't changed much. And it doesn't really suit an urban context. So we have been working hard to try to get MCDOT and the state together on improving many of those intersections to make the area more walkable, more bikeable, to slow cars down and create that urban setting. We're also working, the council is working together to fund another entrance for the metro station at White Flint, which is crucially important to expand the walkability of that area. We have private employers that are really stepping up and making big investments in that area. We need to do our part. So in addition to pressing forward on changing the pattern of intersections, lanes and other aspects of the built environment, we need to really address placemaking initiatives in White Flint, street furniture, other types of community and cultural initiatives that make the area one where an employer would say, this is a great place. This is where I want my employees to be. This is where they're going to want to be. So the appropriation that we've introduced would fund a study that Bethesda Urban District would manage, and hopefully that study will produce some recommendations that we can then act upon in the budget. So I appreciate my colleagues' support on that item, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson. Oh, Councilmember Rice, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to highlight agenda item 2E, which is our Office of Legislative Oversight report on Montgomery County Public Schools performance and opportunity gaps. Certainly yet another great piece by our Office of Legislative Oversight, and certainly sets us up very well for our discussion around Kirwan and the recommendations provided by the Kirwan Commission, as well as the State General Assembly's discussion around overall support for our schools as a whole, as well as our upcoming budget for MCPS as well. So I really just want to say thank you. There's going to be some very robust discussions around this in our Education and Culture Committee meeting, and I'm very encouraged to see this continuous work that's being done by the County Council in terms of ensuring that there's oversight when it comes to one of the largest sectors of our budget, and the success that we want to see that happens and comes out of our Montgomery County Public Schools. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson, please.
Thank you, Council President. I just wanted to echo some of the comments that were made. I won't repeat them by my colleague, Councilmember Reamer. Really appreciate working together on realizing the vision of the White Flint master plan and ensuring that the Pike District becomes what we want it to be. Hope isn't a strategy, and so this will help us to chart that strategy. We hope for it to become the urban community that it is. We've seen some progress there, but not as much as we would like to see, and some of that is that we haven't created those placemaking opportunities to create the urban environment that businesses can see and that residents can realize and can be as walkable and livable and accessible throughout the Pike District, and not just for part of it. This council has been committed to that. I think both the council and the executive branch realize the economic development potential and necessity of this part of our county, realizing what it could be. I don't think that we reach our economic development goals if we don't realize the Pike District and the full vision of White Flint from becoming a reality. So this is not the end, but the beginning of ensuring that, and I look forward to seeing what this study can allow us to do in this critical part of the county, and look forward as well to having our colleagues' support on it.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to be listed as a co-sponsor for the special appropriation of $60,000 for the Pike District placemaking study.
Thank you. Councilmember Rima.
Thank you so much. I also just wanted to express appreciation to the members who have applied and been nominated, well, all those who've applied, but those who've been nominated for the Commission on Remembrance and Reconciliation: Sheila Bashiri, Alexa Fraser, Jason Green, Robert McGarrah, Jacqueline Penn, Aisha Satterwhite, Alonzo Smith, Dr. Smith, Jean Tongura, Timothy Tutt, Reverend Tutt, Michael Williams. I am really, many of us had the opportunity to attend a recent event organized by the Community Coalition that is moving forward on remembrance and reconciliation issues in Poolsville, where we were memorializing the lynching that happened there of Mr. Gibbs, right? It was Mr. Gibbs. And it was very powerful. It just brought all of that history right into the moment, and it was an exceptional experience. The commission is charged with building a broad community conversation. These are the civilian or public members. There'll be institutional members as well, and I'm really looking forward to supporting the work of that commission in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no other lights. It has been moved and seconded that we approve our consent calendar. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Next is the action for the confirmation of Director, Department of Technology Services, Gail Roper. Is there a motion? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that carries unanimously as well. Thank you. Next, we go to the District Council session. There's 2 items under the District Council session. The first is a public hearing. It's an announcement that a public hearing is scheduled for January 14th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. on the Germantown plan for the town sector zone. And then the second announcement is there will be a public hearing scheduled for January 14th, 2020 at 1:30 p.m. on corrective map amendment H-130 for the Tacoma Park Master Plan. The next is introductions of bills, and the first is Bill 3719, which is an economic development fund, use of fund and remedies for noncompliance. The lead sponsor is Councilmember Glass, and co-sponsor is Councilmember Reamer. And Councilmember Glass, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Look forward to working with you over the next year.
And I with you.
Mr. Vice President as well, and thank former President, Madam Council Member Nancy Navarro for your service over the last year. Today, it has been nearly 1 year ago today that residents of Montgomery County learned that one of our county employees stole more than $6.7 million from the taxpayers in an elaborate scheme. Peter Bang used his position as the chief operating officer of the county's Department of Economic Development to forge paperwork, send money to fake companies, and embezzle millions of dollars. Since learning of these crimes, I've been seriously concerned about the lack of oversight and accountability toward our economic development funds here in Montgomery County, which is why today I am introducing the Oversight and Small Business Investment Act, which balances the county's financial support for small businesses to conduct innovative research and development with the need to provide important oversight of taxpayer dollars used to meet our economic development goals. Companies that receive small business innovation research funding and small business technology transfer funding from the federal government will continue to have their grants matched by the county. But after this legislation is enacted, those companies will have to enter into formal contracts, allow the county to access outcome reporting, conduct or request audits, and seek recovery of any misspent funds. None of these common sense safeguards are currently in place. While this legislation is aimed at enacting sensible oversight, it also broadens the opportunity for small businesses to receive public support for their innovative research and development. Under current law, small businesses wanting to receive county funding for small business innovation research grants or small business technology transfer grants can only do so if their work is with the National Institutes of Health. There are currently 14 similar grant programs across the country, but Montgomery County is the only jurisdiction that limits our matching funds to one particular agency, in this case, NIH. But here in Montgomery County, we're home to many other federal agencies that participate in the federal matching grant program, so this legislation will open up those matching grant opportunities to any of the 12 federal agencies that participate in the SBIR or STTR programs, which include NOAA and HHS. I want to thank the Office of Inspector General for looking into this issue and releasing their findings on the vulnerabilities of our county programs, because being a watchdog means keeping a key eye out for liabilities to the county and ensuring that taxpayer dollars are not misspent. And I also want to thank my colleague, Councilmember Hans Reamer, for co-sponsoring this legislation. I appreciate his leadership in fostering an environment for biotech and science industry here while ensuring that we are good stewards of taxpayer funds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you so much. Just wanted to express my appreciation for the legislation. It has been on our list to take up the SBIR program, and so your legislation, will be part of that conversation. I think you put your finger on something important about allowing SBIR matching funds for other agencies, because we have NIST and we have other agencies where there may be SBIR grants that we would want to match. We would need to add funding, of course, in this upcoming budget in order to allow for that broader matching. But we need to really think about the program itself and how we might reconfigure it, because I've been in dialogue, as you mentioned, with biotech leaders about how we could better leverage the limited fundings that we have, perhaps on stage 1 more rather than stage 2, things like that. So we'll all be taking that up at the Fed Committee, and look forward to your participation in those conversations.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President Katz. That's nice to say. I also just like to be added as a co-sponsor. I have small business legislation I'll be talking about momentarily, but would love to be added as a co-sponsor to Councilmember Glass's bill. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. I did want to note that Ken Reichert from Senator Cardin's office is here, and we welcome him as well. Thank you for being with us, Ken. The next item that we're going to be read is that Bill 3819, which is streets and roads. It's a permit to obstruct public rights-of-way amendments. The lead sponsor is Councilmember Friedson, and the co-sponsors are Council Members Glass and Jawando. And Councilmember Friedson, please.
Thank you, Council President Katz, and thank you to Christine Wellens, who worked hard on this, Aaron Kraut in my office, and co-sponsors, Councilmembers Glass and Jawando. This is something I've been focused on since my second full day in office, almost exactly a year ago, when I led a group of stakeholders on a walking tour of downtown Bethesda, specifically focused on pedestrian safety and the livable, walkable, accessible communities we frequently talk about. One of the frequent challenges is the number of sidewalks that are closed, and closed for long periods of time. This legislation will clarify and codify our expectation that pedestrian access must be maintained as a default, and that we view sidewalks not as a luxury, but as an essential part of our transportation infrastructure. As we have an urbanizing county and urbanizing community, we need to treat our neighborhoods in an urban way, which means that a lot of people walk, and those access points to walk need to be safe, and they need to be accessible. We rarely allow part of a county roadway to be taken for a year or more to accommodate a construction project, and we shouldn't allow that to happen for a sidewalk. This is about safety, it's about quality of life, and it's about the changing nature of our county and our community. Specifically, this bill would require the executive to draft regulation for permits to close sidewalks that limit the closure to the time necessary. Require regular review by permitting services and other county government officials involved to determine if a permittee must immediately reopen the sidewalk or begin providing an alternative path on the same side of the street, including a covered walkway or protected pathway in a parking lane or curb lane. Specify the standards that must be met to demonstrate that a sidewalk can't be open or provide alternative access because of extreme hardship, and require the county to publish permit applications and permits online so that they can be readily seen by retailers, by residents, and by other stakeholders involved. It's important to note that this would not apply to the right-of-way along state highways, such as Wisconsin Avenue, though Delegate Corman and other members of our District 16 and District 18 delegations and other members of the General Assembly are working on those issues as we speak, and we continue to work with them to resolve some of the state issues. But our permitting services officials, Department of Transportation officials, Bethesda Urban Partnership, and others have really made great progress on many of these issues on a case-by-case basis, but it's long overdue that we have a systematic approach and a way that is clear and consistent and transparent for residents to understand when and for how long a sidewalk would be closed, and make sure that our urban communities in Montgomery County, which are increasing, and the number of people who are living there and working there are increasing, are maintained as walkable, accessible, and as safe as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Just wanted to be added as a co-sponsor, and I really appreciate Councilmember Friedson's focus on this issue. It has been a vexing problem for years. There have been a number of efforts that have tried to make a change, and it's hard. So I hope this bill will move the needle. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Albernos.
I'd also like to commend Councilmember Friedson for the introduction of this bill. This is a huge issue, and this especially impacts vulnerable communities such as senior citizens, people with disabilities, and children. So I would be happy to be listed as a co-sponsor as well.
Thank you very much. Council Vice President Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to be added as a co-sponsor as well. Looking forward to the committee work session.
Thank you.
Why'd you wait till your second work day?
Councilmember Rice.
Me too.
And please add me as a co-sponsor as well. Thank you. Next is Bill 3919, Contracts and Procurement, Local Small Business Reserve Program, LSBRP Amendments. The lead sponsor is Councilmember Giwando. And with that, we're going to ask Councilmember Giwando to please speak.
Thank you, Council President Katz, and also just want to add my congratulations and thanks to former Council President or immediate past Council President Navarro for her leadership. And we were just remarking on the side about how busy and how much was accomplished in a year. It's hard to believe 1 year ago we were taking the oath and doing this and swearing each other in. So thank you for all your work. This bill, the Local Small Business Reserve Program and Direct Purchase Enhancement Act, is in support of the thousands of Montgomery County residents who are small and medium-sized business owners in the county. This bill takes an important step forward towards supporting and expanding our small business economy in the county. It would be an understatement to say that small businesses are the backbone of our local economy. We often all cite the stats that 90% of our businesses here in the county are less than 50 people, and upwards of 80% are less than 15. So they are really the backbone of our economy. And it's important to note that small businesses also include nonprofits, which include 10% or more of our workforce. And this bill recognizes that fact because previously they had not been included in the Local Small Business Reserve Program. They, along with thousands of people who make Montgomery County their home, also choose to make our county their home for their business. One issue I had heard many times while listening to members of our community in the past year and before is the difficulty of small business to win small dollar direct purchase contracts from county departments. These are the purchases of $10,000 or less. This bill is meant to create more opportunity in the LSBRP and more transparency and opportunity for local businesses to compete for these direct purchases. The legislation has four main features. First, it would amend the Local Small Business Reserve Program to allow nonprofits to qualify and participate in the program. It would increase from 20% to 25% the requirement of percentage in the LSBRP of contracts that need to go to small businesses. It would create a new goal for 50% of these direct purchases, again, purchases under $10,000 in contracts, that they go to Montgomery County small businesses. And then require each county agency to create a report, a sunshine provision, to report on how they have or have not, or how far they've gotten in reaching that goal of 50%. I want to restate my point that nonprofits are, in many cases, function in our county better than some of our businesses. And if you have a good nonprofit, it should function in the black, and many are providing great services to the county, and they should have access, in my opinion, to the over $1 billion in procurement that we have in Montgomery County. While they may not have an individual owner, the 5,356 local nonprofits provide more than 44,000 jobs in our local workforce. Their purchasing power is more than $7.6 billion in our county. They make payroll, they lease space, they purchase goods and services, and they contribute to our local economy. So make no mistake, they are helping grow a vital segment of our economy and should be included in programs aimed at supporting local businesses. Originally created in 2006, the LSBRP initially included a set-aside of 20% of eligible contracts for local small businesses. With more than 90% of the commercial enterprise in our county, again, classified as small business, this bill will increase the availability of eligible contracts in the LSBRP to 25% and would represent a significant investment made to local businesses and ultimately our local economy. After meeting with our Office of Procurement, I learned that around 90% of direct purchases are not made from local providers. These are online orders for lunch instead of ordering from a local restaurant. These are office supplies from a national chain instead of a local supplier. They are small projects handed out to entities in other jurisdictions when we should be considering keeping those dollars here at home. We don't always have to go local. There's still a lot of flexibility in this, and it creates a goal that if you need to move quickly and need to get services from somewhere else in the state or in the country, you can do that. But we should set a goal of saying we want to have at least 50% of these direct purchases happen inside our county from our, again, robust local business community. As we consider how the county conducts business, we should take a look at what we can do to make changes to support our local economy and local businesses. So I thank Councilmember Rice, who didn't make the sheet but had indicated he wanted to be a co-sponsor. And I would ask my colleagues to join me in supporting our local businesses and supporting this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you so much, President Katz. I would like to be added as a co-sponsor of this bill.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Please add me as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
I'd like to be listed as a co-sponsor as well.
Thank you. And Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Council President. I really want to thank Councilmember Dewando for tackling this issue. This is something when I first got to this council, working with former Council President Navarro, we tried to roll up our sleeves and tackle for a long time, working with Mr. Drummer in trying to brainstorm about how to prioritize local businesses here in Montgomery County. And there's still much more work to be done. So I look forward to working with you in enacting this bill, but also now that we have some resurged energy around this, really looking at how we can continue to really foster, because as you said, the majority of our businesses here are small, but they're also owned by people of color and a lot of immigrants in our community as well. And so this is truly empowering on so many levels and falls into this racial equity lens that we've continued to talk about. And so it's really important for us to continue to support and really lift up these businesses and make sure that these minority and female and disabled-owned businesses that are here in Montgomery County have a fair shake when it comes to competition, what other jurisdictions have done, but we have still lagged behind. So thank you very much for your leadership on this issue, and I look forward to working with you on many more to come.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Iglesias.
I, too, would like to be a co-sponsor.
Thank you. And Council Vice President Hucker.
Agree with everything Councilmember Rice said and want to be added as a co-sponsor as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And I, too, would like to be added as a co-sponsor. And I failed to mention that all of these bills that we're introducing today will be, the public hearing is scheduled for January 14th, the year 20 at 1:30 p.m. And the next bill is expedited bill 4019, and it's the Inspector General's stay-up amendments. Its lead sponsor is Council Members Navarro, Friedson, and Katz, all of whom happen to be on the GO committee, and Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you. So this expedited bill would authorize the Inspector General to hire one or more deputies as a term merit employee and other staff of the office as a merit employee. Under current law, the Inspector General must hire each staff member as a term merit employee with a maximum term that ends at the same time as the 4-year term of the Inspector General. This requires a new Inspector General to start her term with no existing staff members or institutional experience. It also makes it more difficult to recruit staff when an Inspector General is appointed to either a new term or to complete the term of an Inspector General who leaves early. So this bill would create a middle ground for the appointment of staff. The Inspector General would be required to appoint one or more deputies as a term merit employee, but would be permitted to hire all other staff as merit employees. The bill will require existing term merit staff members to continue in that status until their current term ends, and they could be rehired as a merit employee after the end of their term. The Inspector General could fill new vacancies under the bill as soon as the law takes effect. And I would like to mention that this particular bill really continues the work of the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee to strengthen the Office of the Inspector General. It was noted earlier in Councilmember Glass's bill that this is close to the anniversary of the scandal and fraud of Peter Bang, and this council acted very quickly to really strengthen the Office of the Inspector General in terms of what she can now look into and have ability to do more audits, really truly realizing that there were definitely some areas that needed to be strengthened and improved. And so the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee has worked very hard. Councilmember Friedson has also led the way, and I think that we are continuing to do whatever we can to make sure that this is an office that is able to operate the way it should be within a complexity of a county such as ours, and with a budget such as ours. I think that we have made great improvements. So that is there for you for introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is the calls of bills for final reading. The first one is Bill 1419, the Police Advisory Commission to be established. The Public Safety Committee recommends enactment with amendments. And as they change seats here, let me go through that from the Public Safety Committee's side, that part of what we discussed was that to remove the language specifying that each council member would nominate one member. That was a 2-to-1 vote. Council member Hucker and Vice President Hucker and myself were on the two side. Councilmember Albornoz was on the one side. We noted that we should clarify the union representative should be the president of the union or the president's designee. We added language to the bill regarding the commission's diversity, and there's also a proposal which we're going to hear from in just a few moments, by Councilmember Glass, allow the commission to elect its chair and vice chair, and to require the commission to accept correspondence and comments from members of the public, require the county to respond to commission requests for information within 30 days after receiving the request, and require the executive to nominate 2 youth members. I do think it should be noted, and we still get emails that people are calling this a police oversight commission. It is not. It is a police advisory commission. And with that, Councilmember Reamer, please.
Thank you, Council President. I really want to thank you for guiding this bill through the process, the deliberative process at the committee. I thought you did an excellent job. Really entertained a lot of the substantive issues and had a very thorough discussion, and I was really very pleased with the committee's recommendation. So I want to thank you for that. I just wanted to share a few words about the background for this legislation. As my colleagues know, last year I served as council president, and it was in June of 2018 that an event that really shocked a lot of us and really shocked the community occurred, which was the shooting of Robert White. At the time, I, as council president, really felt the urgency of formulating the council's responses, working with my colleagues to do that, and I had the opportunity to meet with the NAACP, with Linda Plummer and Patricia Fenn, and they came in to raise their concerns about the responsiveness of the police department to community concerns and the potential for improving or strengthening measures that support our police department. So we began to explore various proposals, and the one that the NAACP was most interested in was what is known, generally speaking, as a Civilian Oversight Commission. And in fact, former Councilmember Cherie Branson had been a member of the Charter Review Commission, and she had recommended a Civilian Oversight Commission at the Charter Review Board. And so we began to explore that, began drafting legislation that would prepare that. So a typical Civilian Oversight Commission reviews complaints about police work. You know, if a police officer has done something that a person does not feel is appropriate, that person might lodge a complaint, and a civilian oversight board would review those complaints. That is typically what civilian oversight boards do around the country. They also do not have a very strong track record. They typically don't work all that well. And what we learned as we investigated Maryland law and county law and collective bargaining agreements is that a civilian oversight commission like that would have severe limitations in Montgomery County. And it really wouldn't likely be worth the effort because commission members would not be able to see information that is part of the personnel process, and they wouldn't. It would be a toothless commission. And I certainly wasn't interested in pursuing something like that, and the NAACP was not as well. So we regrouped. But as we did that, I had the chance to sit down with Chief Manger, and I talked to him about the issue. And it was one of the more informative and really powerful conversations that I had about this issue. Chief Manger talked to me about, first of all, some of the structural weaknesses in the department with discipline. That Montgomery County's police management has some of the weakest powers when it comes to officer discipline of any department in Maryland. And there are real issues that need to be worked on there. Much of that is in state law, and we need a variety of state legislative changes. So I was pleased that this year, for example, the council supported changes to the MPIA law, which restricts information that might be part of the disciplinary process. But we do need to improve our own department's management ability to enforce their own policies with discipline. But at the same time, Chief Manger said to me, you know, while there are some challenges, we will do it. If that is what the council wants us to do, we will do it. And to me, that was it was a somewhat revelatory experience because it really demonstrated that police departments and responsive, progressive police leaders understand even better perhaps than we might, that police work is grounded in community values, in values of responsiveness to elected governance, the democratic process, transparency, and trust. And that is an essential component of progressive, strong police leadership. And to hear such a clear, direct statement, if this is what the council wants to do, we will do it, was very affirming. It is a big contrast to what we say. I hate to politicize this issue, but in Washington right now, the president is seeking to remove ethics, moral foundation from the military with his review of the Navy SEALs disciplinary procedures. It is a very striking contrast to me over an immoral approach to military policy and what we want in our community, which is police work to be grounded in values of ethics centered around community values. But with in mind the fact that we did not have the ability to enact a civilian oversight commission and that even those bodies have limitations, we turned in a different direction. Robin Gaster, Dr. Robin Gaster, a longtime advocate around police work, had recommended, and Delegate Laura Charkodian connected me to Robin Gaster, a alternative strategy, which is to say, rather than looking at what happens when things have gone wrong, why aren't you looking at policies that keep the ship working the way that it should work, moving in the right direction? A commission that instead of seeking to hold officers accountable for something done wrong, looks at how the whole structure of the organization can do things right, at what community policing is, at why we have a particular approach to traffic stops and what we get from that, what our use of data and our collection of data is, how we use marijuana in our enforcement, what training our officers may receive in dealing with individuals who have mental health challenges. All of these are policy issues that the department sets and that guide the work of police officers every day. Every officer is by the book, and they follow the policies and guidance that they receive from the leadership of the department. And those are the key issues that we need to really be more engaged in. But there are limits to what we can do as a council to be engaged in those very finely grained issues. And so having a community advisory board that weighs in, to me, is completely appropriate. I think the general philosophy is that an ounce of prevention is more valuable than, a pound of cure. The underlying message to me of this commission is about transparency and openness and community engagement. I know that there is a tension between wanting to support our police officers, for whom we have the greatest appreciation for the work that they do, the challenges that they take on in their work, and also supporting reform in police work. But that tension is just an inherent natural tension. If you don't experience that tension, then you are ignoring police policy issues fundamentally, and you're not keeping our department at the cutting edge of progressive the progressive approach to police work. So some advocate a bunker mentality, that police should be removed and that elected officials should stay out, the community should stay out. I don't believe in that approach. I don't think our department I know our department doesn't believe in that approach. We want to have a collaborative, healthy dialogue and engagement with elected officials, with the community, and I believe that this commission will be part of the solution. There's so much anger and hostility out there in this country because of incidents, and we've had our share. The status quo will not stand. We need to make changes as well, and I believe that this commission, again, will put our department where it seeks to be, which is part of the solution to very challenging issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President, and I want to thank my colleague and now new seatmate, Councilmember Reamer, for introducing this bill, and it's been an honor to work on it with you, as well as these issues overall. I agree with everything that you said. This is the right bill at the right time. I want to thank the community members who have been very dogged in a good way in their support and advocacy on this bill and on this issue of how do we improve community police relations, improve trust, improve the relationship so that, again, we can have what I've talked about before, this co-production of public safety, where every stakeholder, the community, the police, elected officials, we come together and everyone is on the same page about how we're moving forward in a way that respects the rights of everybody, protects public safety system that we have. And I really believe that we can get there, and that this commission is a great model, as it's been in Sacramento and other places, where they agreed on the vast majority of recommendations and are implementing them now. This is a great vehicle to engage and allow that dialogue. So I want to, I do. Yeah. I want to thank the Councilmember Reamer for his work on this. And as I said with the racial equity bill, which is an important landmark bill, this is similarly an important landmark bill, and we should be happy that we're passing it today, hopefully. But then the work ahead of us is going to be great, because we will get, when we get some of this data, when we get the audits, when we start digging into why things are happening differently as far as arrest rates in different communities and stops, then we are going to be confronted with what do we do about it and how do we change practice and policy, in some cases law. And I have confidence that we'll get there, but this is going to be a great vehicle to help us do it in a way that's together, so that we can get to that vision where everyone feels safe, everyone has trust and respect, and feels that their police department is there to protect and serve all members of our community, which I know that's what they want to do, and that's what they are doing each and every day, putting their life on the line. But we've had our incidences, as has the whole country, and we're trying to define what does 21st century policing look like today, what should it look like, and this will help us get there, I think. I wanted to thank the Public Safety Committee for accepting the amendment to add 2 young people, one under 25 and one between the ages of 25 and 35. We know that young people are disproportionately impacted in interacting with the criminal justice system, and several of my Vice President Hucker now, and so I'm really glad that we added that in there. I did want to propose an amendment or make a motion to restore the original bill language that would allow each council member to nominate one of the 9 council-nominated members. I think this is an important aspect of the bill, and while a departure from our general nominating procedure is important in this context because we are grappling with an issue that has been so contentious, and there are many different perspectives about where we should go. And I think those perspectives as far as geography and race and ethnicity and background and experience should be brought to this commission, and I think this amendment will help do that, or restoring the original intent of the bill. And this is how it's done in Sacramento. It's worked just fine, and I trust my colleagues to make really smart appointments, and I would make a motion that we would restore that. I think now is the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
To restore that provision. And again, thank Councilmember Reed.
Thank you. It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. If anybody wants to speak to this motion, you do. Okay. What I'm going to do is clear this off, and then I've written down who's next in line here. And then what we are going to do is start over. So, Councilmember Albornoz, you will be first, and anybody else who wants to speak to this amendment, please cut your lights on.
So I definitely want to speak to this amendment, but also want to just state how important this conversation has been throughout the Public Safety Committee, and I do appreciate, Mr. President, how you have chaired a very thoughtful and deliberative discussion. I want to begin my comments by just acknowledging and thanking our first responders and our law enforcement officials for all that you do and the sacrifices that you make every day on behalf of our residents. Just yesterday in the Public Safety Committee, we learned that there were more than 800 visits to the psychologist by our first responders this year alone, acknowledging the difficulty and the challenges and the complexities of this unbelievably noble profession. I also want to acknowledge that trust is so important to ensure that our law enforcement officials can effectively and safely safeguard our community. And that's why I think having this commission is so important, because it will add another layer of support, in my opinion. It will help ensure further trust within the community, which will make our law enforcement's jobs easier. And so that's why I'm supportive of this bill. And with regards to this specific amendment, I have to be honest, I have evolved on this particular discussion because my starting point was one of concern regarding how this would be administered and potentially the precedent this would set with regards to other boards and commissions. But I evolved because of the subject matter and because I believe this is a really unique discussion. This is a really unique commission in a variety of different ways. And while I think we have added very important and substantive language to ensure that there is diversity in every way imaginable on this particular commission, I think this particular measure would be yet another tool in our toolbox to help ensure that from each of our various perspectives regarding whatever our priorities are, whether that be geographic, whether it be a focus on youth, whether it be a focus on some element that is important to us, I think this gives us a tool to nominate, which would still need to be approved by all of our colleagues, but the ability to nominate somebody whom we feel would be in a strong position to help address these issues. And so that's why I felt the pros outweigh the cons with regards to this particular measure within this bill, and that's why I supported it.
Thank you. Councilmember Glaze.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank my colleagues for all the work that was put into this piece of legislation. I'm proud to be an original co-sponsor of it, and I really am glad I'm following Councilmember Albornoz, who I think nicely framed this conversation. And I associate myself with the evolution as it relates to this particular item. But let me also state that this legislation as a whole is not us versus them. This is everybody coming together, police officers, civilians, government officials, working to figure out how to make our community safer for everybody. That's the ultimate goal of this legislation. And as to this particular amendment, we each have unique backgrounds and perspectives that in our allowance of selecting members of the commission, we will be sharing those unique backgrounds. And while I was originally concerned of how that would be administered, the system of having the full council ultimately supporting the full commission is that check to make sure that this council and future councils make sure that the diversity reflected not only in the members of the council but of the community are ultimately on this commission, to make sure that the 1.1 million residents currently, the more residents, tens of thousands that will be here in the future, that the diversity of life experiences are reflected on that commission. And so I will support this amendment.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wright, Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. And so I'm a little confused about how this would work. Because if we're saying that individual council members have the ability to put forth a person, but then they still have to be approved by the rest of the members, what that does is sets up an opportunity for us to battle against each other over a particular member. That's a concern. I don't want to be in a situation to where I'm fighting with my colleagues over a person who I think should be a part of this board and then lobbying them to have someone support, nor now having an issue because somebody who I personally believe should be on this is not on the board. That doesn't, it really, I just want to caution colleagues, while I understand completely about, and that's the reason why when it comes to other boards and commissions, we get a list and we're able to then check off and identify who, has expressed interest and support them. And as we see people that we know, we can talk about those kinds of things. Those kinds of things will still happen and we can encourage them. I don't think that we need this to ensure that we have what we want. We get diversity on our boards now. When I look at the Remembrance and Reconciliation Committee that Councilmember Reamer just talked about, I know a lot of these people, and a lot of these people were dedicated to this issue and have worked tremendously and are going to do a great job. And while some may not be from my district, some may be, it doesn't matter. I trust and I know that these folks are there, and they're there for the right reasons. And so I think that, again, it's just something where, and it's not about it being a bad thing. I just think that we just need to be very cautious about what it may set up in terms of precedent for us and what the future may hold if you have somebody that a person's really passionate about, but other people may not support.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. Also want to acknowledge and thank Councilmember Reamer and Councilmember Jawanda, everybody who's been working on this particular issue for a while. I am reminded of at least what I took into consideration when I supported Chief Jones, which is that, we do have a very complex county that continues to grow, and we are so fortunate to be able to live in a county where we have so many different communities coming together and really getting along and really truly contributing to what is the best that we can do here in our county. And so for me, this is an opportunity, a tool to ensure that we continue to enhance that relationship between our law enforcement and a community that continues to be complex. So towards that end, I think that it's something that we should do whatever we can to make it successful. And I will support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Council President. I agree with Councilmember Rice. I'm concerned about the process of, we're not set up to make appointments. The county executive has a, board commission office that is set up to do this. I'm concerned about who and how each of us would be making these determinations and what that would mean for access to this opportunity to serve. I'm also really mostly concerned about not only the comments that Councilmember Rice made about kind of a competition over an individual appointment and how that would work and potential unintended consequences that that could create, but an unnecessarily politicizing of the commission. The challenge that I see is the risk that a commission member would be acting on behalf of a council member and would be serving on behalf of a council member and representing almost on behalf of a council member. Like we have many commissions where you represent a department and the department's interests and goals. And the point here should be to be serving on behalf of the county. And I think that as many have raised, the goal should be to make sure we have diversity in geography and age and race and religion and background and sexual identity and gender identity. And that is part of the amendment that we're going to be taking up. And I think it's our job as council members, as we make this appointment and all appointments, to ensure that the composition and appointments of this commission reflect that. But I think the challenge that we face of how we do it and the unintended consequences that it would create, I appreciate the rationale behind it, but I have some real concerns with it, and I won't be voting for it.
Thank you very much. Council Vice President Hucker.
Well, I've spoken to many of you individually about this and publicly. And I don't have any concern about the outcome as much as I have confusion about the process and whether it'll actually achieve what the proponents of it have wanted. But I think I gave remarks yesterday on a different matter that a lot of that could be dealt with in regulation and worked out in the future. So I think as long as I would just ask that a memo be done from the executive branch about how this would be, and I know I proposed one in committee, one possible way we could work out the appointment process. So as long as that's done in the future, I think I'm comfortable with the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I still believe that this is not a good way to do this bill. I'm concerned about we've all talked about the diversity that we want on this committee, and we do need it. Once we start taking people out of the pool that's before all of us for this committee, then that leaves less people in the pool that all of us would be able to decide on. I believe a collective discussion on a person, though ultimately we would vote on that person, if the way this is set up, the way this is being suggested, that if a council member nominated someone and that person was not accepted, then that council member would be the only person that could nominate again for that position. And that concerns me as well. I've talked about the politicizing of this. I don't believe this should be politicized at all. So I'm not supportive of the amendment, though I do believe that this, from the way I can figure, that this will pay us. With that, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. And that is Councilmember Glass, Jawando, Reamer, and Navarro, Councilmember Hucker, and Councilmember Alvernois. Those opposed, please raise yours. And that's Councilmember Rice, Friedson, and myself. So that the amendment does pass 6-3. The next item, so now we're going back to the original. And next, Councilmember Friedson, you're the first speaker on that.
Thank you for that. Appreciate all the work that has gone in to this bill, which has been a long and deliberative process. Appreciate all the leadership that has gone into it. I have an amendment that I will pass around right now to colleagues. Thank you to Ms. Myhill for drafting this amendment. The amendment is simple. It would just have the public members of the commission participate in the county's or the department's Citizens Academy. I think it's important as part of this. The goal is collaboration, not conflict, to bring everybody together. I think everybody involved having the perspective of all sides is important. I think information and knowledge here would be helpful, and so I would ask the support for those, the millions watching at home, I suppose, as Councilmember Jawando likes to say. I'll read the amendment, but beginning on page 3, after line 38, add new subparagraph D and renumber remaining paragraphs to read D, the public members appointed under paragraph C must participate in the Montgomery County Police Department Citizens Academy. So I've asked for.
It's been moved and seconded.
Seconded by the sponsor.
Thank you very much. Council member, Council member Reamer, please.
It's a good amendment. I appreciate this. I think that the Citizens Academy will be a real benefit to anyone who who goes through it, and so I absolutely support this. I think probably don't even need to discuss it too much. Let's just vote for it. It sounds good.
Somehow I don't believe the democracy works that well, but thank you. Next is Councilmember Jawando, please.
Thank you, Council President Katz, and democracy does not work that way. You're correct. I am also supportive of this. I've been to our academy. I think understanding, doing ride-alongs, this type of interaction is critical, and people who are going to be making decisions need to understand what is going on in the real world and understand the perspective. One of the things that I think is missing in our society today is empathy and understanding and walking in someone else's shoes and understanding their perspective before passing judgment. And this is a great way to institutionalize that and also potentially expose commission members to new perspectives or new ideas that they might have to improve. You know, when you get a new look at someone who's coming into something new, they can experience it. So I think it's a great amendment, and I will support it as well.
Okay. There's no other lights for the amendment. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed, and that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Next is Council Member Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we've been talking about diversity, the importance of it, and also want to talk about the importance of language and how language is always evolving, particularly how we talk about the changing demographics and life here for the residents of Montgomery County. And so similar to the amendment I proposed last week regarding the Racial Equity and Social Justice Bill, which I'm looking forward to being signed into law whenever we're done with this session, the language for the amendment, which I believe is in the packet, or everybody should already have that, essentially amends lines 23 to 18 to remove the language gender and sexual orientation and amend that to sex, including on the basis of gender identity or orientation. Again, it's the exact same language that we've been using, that we used last week, and that I hope we will get into the practice of continuing to include as we talk about full representation of our community.
It's been moved and seconded. There's no lights for the amendment. Everyone in favor, please raise your hand, and that carries unanimously as well. Thank you very much. Next is Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Wanted to just raise this issue of compensation for the commission members. When we took it up at committee, I suggested at the time that it wasn't necessary, but subsequent to that, we have embarked in a new policy of compensating some commission members, and it could be that there are some members of this commission for whom the time commitment would have an impact on their availability for work, and that would be a choice that they might not be able to make. I think that it ought to be available. I don't think every commission member needs to be paid, but I think that it ought to be available to those who might need to apply for that. So unfortunately, I don't come prepared with specific language, but I could ask Amanda and Bob, if we wanted this to be included in the legislation, if we wanted the commission members to be eligible, what would we need to say?
You would need to amend the bill to allow.
Can you move your mic just a little closer to you?
Sure. You would need to amend the bill to allow for the compensation, and I don't Bob may be able to tell you what we did with the racial equity bill, and you might want to mirror that.
Yeah, can we just mirror that?
The racial equity bill provided that the public members would receive or be eligible for a stipend of up to $2,000 a year.
Okay, so I'm interested in eligibility. I don't think it needs to be provided to all the members necessarily.
Well, I think it would go to all of them. I mean,
It'd have to be.
Well, it didn't
it's not
really
like we're
determine.
not going to pick and choose which, I mean,
All
the
public.
racial
All
equity.
public.
The public.
No, I
is
thought
right.
our bill allowed eligibility, and then that would be determined through regulation.
No, it's, everybody's going to get the 2,000.
If they're a public member. That's
If they're a
the
public
key.
member, it's not going to, we're not going to have a means test, you know, do you really need this money? You know, we're not, that's not really contemplated in the bill.
Is what it is.
So is that a motion, or what?
Yes, that's a motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Okay. Did you want to speak to this one? Okay, please, Councilmember Twondo.
And I don't have the language in front of me, but we should, if, my reading of when we passed the racial equity language was that if requested, that you would, someone could certainly waive their fee. Is that correct? If they said, I don't need this, or I don't need to get it, and I'm a good county resident, and I, save the $2,000, couldn't you waive that?
I'm
Check.
just thinking out loud here. I mean, there's a constitutional provision about public officers not being able to raise or lower their salary. Could they give it back to the county? Yeah, they could do that.
Okay, so they could donate it back. Okay,
Yes, they could do that.
In either scenario, I'm fine with it. I think, again, I know something that Councilman Rice and others have talked about. We need to revisit holistically with our boards and commissions, which I look forward to doing. But particularly the amendment that I offered for the young people, the amendment that was just passed unanimously to require participation in the citizens panel. We're putting, this is going to be a commission that significant time is going to be invested into, and we want to make sure that people can give that time and not forego their responsibilities at home. So I think this would be a helpful addition, and that's why I seconded it, and I hope people support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And so as I was at our Board of Social Services meeting last night with attendees, two of which who are attendees from the public, one of which who had to go by phone because she had missed her bus and couldn't be there, a person who actually is a recipient of social services. She's one of the representatives there. It certainly is something where I made the comments before, if we are embarking on this, and we've talked about it for quite a long time, that there needs to be equity in terms of making sure that this is available for all. So I do support your amendment.
Thank you, Councilmember Glass.
Thank you. I want to go back and ask Mr. Drummer about the means testing, which he mentioned, because clearly in the bill that we passed last week, or last month, the racial equity bill, the precedent that we've set there in compensating members of the board, there are approximately 90 boards, commissions, and committees here in the county. I served on a number of them, and we always strive to find diversity, socioeconomic and other types of diversity on all of our boards. But for a particular board like this, if there is an academic, someone who has been brought on to discuss best practices and evaluate, someone like that might not need financial compensation and might volunteer their time just like any of the other 90 boards and committees and commissions. And so is the means testing, explain the legality there from your perspective.
Well, you're setting up people to have essentially a public office of sorts to advise, the council, and you're providing for them a stipend of $2,000. I'm not sure you can just say, well, there's nothing in the bill in the racial equity bill that says $2,000 if you need it. It's $2,000, whether you need it or not. I mean, I don't know how you would, at least I certainly didn't anticipate there'd be any discussion with
Well,
the
and
members
as I
now,
understand,
because all the members could always, just as the council did a bunch of years ago when the employees were unable to get any raises because the county was short on money.
Right.
Council members gave back the money, but they weren't allowed to not accept it because they actually were entitled to a raise in law, and you couldn't not give them the raise, but they were able to donate it back to the county. I mean, that could happen, but they would
Sure.
still receive it.
So the difference there being the scenario you gave was, elected officials, and these are appointed officials, essentially appointed representatives of the community. As I recall, within the 90 different boards, commissions, and committees, there is a provision that says that people can be reimbursed, and I believe it is for child care and a few other things. I don't know if anyone is more knowledgeable about that, but again, just trying to figure out how to, because I'm there in spirit, but I'm just not sure the practicality and the precedent for the other 90 boards and commissions where everyone's giving their time, and whether this is something that, while deemed important right now, we possibly defer it until the budget session, the budget season, to figure out how to manage it entirely and dive deeper into this means testing or eligibility requirement. So those are my thoughts on this. I understand the importance of it, but just trying to make sure that it is fair and equitable for everybody who spends their time volunteering their service to the county.
There is a general provision of county law that
Amanda, can you
allows-
move your mic here?
Sorry, I should,
Yeah,
act like
I
I'm
hear
yelling
you.
at my
I do the
kids,
same
right?
thing.
There's a general provision of county law that does allow for reimbursement requests. It's for mileage, dependent care, those types of things. I did bring up the racial equity language, and it says, except for the 8 public members, members must receive no compensation for their services. Each of the 8 public members may receive an annual stipend of $2,000 and the reimbursement language.
Right now, we're using the word may. It doesn't say shall. So can we say that may means if requested? Yeah, you know what may is.
So the way that the reimbursement requests in practice work is that the individual, the committee member, has to submit a request for reimbursement. They're not automatically reimbursed for everything.
I think this should be.
May means, in my mind, means if there's money in the budget to pay for it.
Well,
you're not appropriating money in the, in the bill, and it's subject to appropriation. So if there's no money in the budget, there's not going to be a stipend.
But are you saying that we could not say may if requested, the 2 words if requested?
Well, it depends on what you consider the people you're appointing. I mean, they're appointed for a term of office, and they're provided with compensation for that.
But it's compensation, but it's a stipend. It's not a salary.
Well, it's not enough to live on.
No, I understand.
But it's
If
not,
you're very
but
frugal,
it's
I
not
guess you
really any
could, but yeah.
different. I mean, other than the amount, it's not different than paying the Board of Appeals and the members of the Board of Appeals, the Merit System Protections Board. They don't have to ask for the money.
I appreciate
They
that.
receive
but
it.
I believe, and I'm going to go back down the list. So, Councilmember Albornoz, please.
So I appreciate this discussion, and I agree in principle with the stipend approach. The reason I supported the stipend specific to the Racial Equity Commission is because their work is going to be all-encompassing. It's going to touch so many different areas across county government, whereas we're discussing a very critically important but defined subject area as are most of the other 80 or so boards and commissions. And so in my mind, I justified my support for the racial equity bill, again, because of the all-encompassing notion of that work. In this instance, I don't feel comfortable supporting this until we do have a broader conversation on how we're going to address this holistically across the board, because we did obviously already set a precedent to some degree with the racial equity bill, but I think this sets an even further precedent, in my opinion, because of the defined nature of other boards and commissions. And until we have a broader discussion that provides some more recommendations and some more thought rather than just thinking about it here from the dais, while I respect the motion, I'd prefer to hold off and revisit this until we discuss this holistically. And so for that reason, I'm not going to support this amendment right now.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, the discussion, at least during the work session on this, seemed to indicate that there would be the executive branch, effectively through regulation, or at least that's how I understood it, would be proposing how this would be implemented. And there was discussion, if I recall, during the racial equity conversation about it could be allocated by number of meetings, and you get paid per meeting, and if you missed a meeting, you don't get paid for that meeting, et cetera. We didn't delve into those details, and it was my impression, based on the May language and the discussion during that committee session, that that there was the opportunity that some regulation was going to come back to us. It was pending appropriation that we had not appropriated, although there's an expectation that we would appropriate. We haven't appropriated, and obviously reserve that right as the appropriating body, the budget, with the budget authority. And number two, I was under the impression that there was regulation that would come back. I just wanted to check with you. Am I accurate in that, or was that some confusion at the committee?
Well, the bill contemplated a regulation, from the executive about many things in the bill, and there could be a regulation that would implement that provision.
So I just wanted to raise, I share some of the concerns that have been raised about having 90 boards and commissions, and having served on them with many people, some of whom it was a challenge, and what precedent this sets and how we decide who wins and who loses. I also, based on the previous amendment, I'm now picking somebody for, individually for payment, which changes the dynamic of how we do this. I mean, we're set up to hire our individual council staff offices. I, had never contemplated being set up to hire county commission members, and if we start doing that for other commissions based on the rationale provided, I think there's a lot here, and so I just wanted to raise the question of whether we could allow it, but not move it forward, set it up so that it would come back to us, be pending the review of all the other boards and commissions, what the fiscal reality are of potentially paying every single person who serves as a public member of any board or commission, what that would mean to the budget, what the trade-offs are, because there's going to be trade-offs. We have finite resources, how we would implement it, and so forth.
I would suggest then that the language be more in line with the executive may adopt a regulation pursuant, a method 2 or method 1 regulation defining how defining or determining compensation for public members, and then you would see it. The executive would then produce something.
Can I interrupt, please? I believe there's Councilmember Reamer would like to say something.
All right, I'm going to withdraw the motion. I believe I need the support of the person who seconded it. Is that correct, or what? How does that work, Bob or Amanda?
I need a second.
Need a second to withdraw the motion. Doesn't matter if it's that same person.
He's withdrawing. Yeah, no.
I give my consent even though it's not required.
Thank you. All right. This is a challenging issue. This is a challenging issue. Councilmember Juwando and I just did a quick back-of-the-envelope compensation calculation. It could be upwards of $2 million if every commission in the county had 9 public members. That's a third of all the money we put towards early childhood education in the budget this year.
Right.
You know, we don't have that kind of money just laying around loose change. So we've got to be very deliberative. So I think that,
It's a good discussion.
It's a good discussion. Let's not distract from the big picture here.
Right.
I believe we're all working our way towards passing a landmark bill, and we'll come back to this issue in due course.
Thank you. Councilman, are you withdrawing your name as well from the list? Okay. So, and I'm going back again to the original lights that were on. Councilmember Giundo, you were next in line from the original. I don't know that we've already covered everything that you wanted to.
I'll take the opportunity, I think since we're rounding the home stretch here, just to say I think this is a really, really important bill. I'm really excited and appreciate my colleagues for the discussion and the deliberate nature in which we proceeded forward. All the community input has really made a difference and will continue to make a difference as we appoint and then get this this committee up and running, and look forward to the work ahead. And just want to again congratulate, hopefully in advance, Councilmember Reamer, and it was a pleasure working with you on this bill.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think everything's been said, but just my perspective on this bill, and I'm grateful to the sponsors for getting us to this place. I continue to talk to and receive a lot of messages from folks in the community who have a lot of concerns about this legislation. And I really want to ask people to be patient and to give it a chance. There are plenty of supporters of the police out there who feel like this is moved forward by a council that is somehow hostile to the police and driven by some sort of special interest agenda. And I think that I want you to know there's nothing further from the truth. I've spent 5 years on the Public Safety Committee, and I've been involved with the police long before that. And every time I talk to members of our great police force, I learn something. And I really think we need a body of people to advise us and to advise the county executive who are engaged in police work and appreciative of it, and in discussions with them about the challenges that they face. And on the other side, there have been community advocates for this whose first reaction to the bill as it was written was, oh, it shouldn't have a representative of the police department and shouldn't have a representative of the police union. That doesn't make any sense. Then we won't be able to get whatever reforms passed. And I think that is absolutely misguided as well, because this bill is all about dialogue and understanding. This bill is about getting people in a room who have a different perspective than each other. And we have a great police force, and it needs to be better. And we get that if we have members of the community understanding more about the police force and the challenges that they face. And we have members of our police department who understand more about the community and what they're experiencing. And I am very well aware that we can't do everything with this, what an advisory commission. And we are greatly limited by state law, and I've been an advocate for updating the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights. But if everybody has that as an expectation, I think this bill really can move in the positive direction and produce outcomes that we count on for many of our other advisory committees, because I think we create the best public policy when we get the most inputs from the community and we build the most understanding among community members who share a different perspective and come from different experiences. And I think this bill will get us there, and that's why I want people to give it a chance. So thank you again for your leadership on this.
Thank you very much. And you said it well, Council Vice President. I too am someone who, as was in the very beginning of the discussion, it was mentioned that we certainly worked through this with Public Safety Committee to try our very best to be fair on all sides, and we will continue to do that on many, many issues, not just this one. And I think it has to be noted that over the years, Montgomery County, as well as local municipalities, as well as many other places, have had advisory groups and for police officers, for the police work. It's not an easy job. My own brother is a former state trooper. I know that it is not an easy job, but I do believe that once we have people that will roll up their sleeves and have good, honest discussions about the topic that we're discussing here, that we can have our best work. I've seen it happen on other occasions, and I believe that once people start listening to each other and once people start realizing why something has happened and why something should be changed and all of those things that are so necessary, that we will be very, very appreciative of all the work that's being done. The unknown is always a concern, and I think that's part of the reason that we've gotten so many different emails on both positive and negative on this legislation. I certainly am supportive of the police, and I believe it's been said time and time and time again that this council is extremely supportive of the police as well. We sincerely appreciate their efforts, and that for all first responders. So I believe that at the end of the day, though I'm still not in agreement with parts of this about the way that some of this would go about, I, too, am going to vote for this bill. And with that, I'm going to ask Madam Clerk to please call the roll.
Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Jawando?
Yes.
Mr. Jawando votes yes. Mr. Reamer?
Yes.
Mr. Reamer votes yes. Ms. Navarro?
Yes.
Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Albornoz? Yes. Mr. Albornoz votes yes. Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friedson? Yes. Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. Hooker votes yes. Mr. Katz?
Yes, and that makes it unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving right along, we're going to go to Bill 3618, Transportation Management, which is the Transportation Demand Management Plan amendments. It's the T&E Committee recommends enactment, and from that, we're going to ask the committee chair, the Vice President, to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this county has long been committed to transportation demand management. We, I think, all share the goal of getting our county to partner with our businesses to get their employees to work using transit or telecommuting as much as possible. We need to do these things to give our workers transportation options, to reduce congestion, to get cars off the road, and to address our climate goals. So this bill cleans up and simplifies our longstanding transportation demand management process. It unfortunately has been one that has produced too much confusion among our employers and not enough management of our transportation demand. So this bill, as amended, updates and simplifies our existing program to allow all the areas of the county to help us reach the goals. It gives DOT more options and flexibility to implement TDM throughout the county. We are committed to reaching our TDM goals and our goals for non-auto driver mode share all over the county, and this bill, I think, moves us toward that. It is simply a platform at this stage to authorize our DOT to execute TDM, and it's likely to be followed, we hope, with executive regulation and other policies in the future. And so let me stop there, Mr. President, and turn it back to you if you want to recognize our department.
Thank you very much. Did the department have something that they would like to add, please?
Yes, I'd like to give just a little bit of background on how this bill was initiated. About 3 years ago, there was substantial frustration with how traffic mitigation agreements were being negotiated and executed for development projects. A work group was established of council staff, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Permitting Services, and the Planning Department to look at the processes and procedures about how those agreements were developed. Through that, over a period of time, there was a conclusion reached that it would be better to have this established as a regulatory framework rather than as a contract-based enforcement of traffic mitigation agreements. The base of this bill really changes that structure from a traffic mitigation agreement to the approval of a transportation demand management plan for a development project. If no other action were taken, that regulatory structure would replace. If circumstances change for a project and what they agreed to no longer makes sense, then there's a renegotiation.
Others who have a choice. If they had a choice, it would be different. But when you're forced to have a commute that's an hour and a half to 2 hours via mass transit because you're only doing connecting ride-on bus routes to get to work or getting in a car, they're going to choose to get in a car regardless of whether you give them $100 a month or not. And so what's the solution that's going to be there to achieve what you're looking to do when it comes to the employee side of this?
Okay.
I did want to, I'm Sandy Breck.
You want? Yeah.
Okay, that seems better. We do work with individual employers and employees to try to address the kinds of issues that you're talking about, and our only options are not just transit. We do have other options available in terms of carpooling and van pooling, telework, which Councilmember Glass mentioned, also compressed work weeks so that they aren't having to make that trip quite as often or perhaps during the peak periods, things of that nature. So there are other alternatives. There's no question, though, that good transit is an underpinning to all of what we're talking about with regard to the non-auto driver mode share achievement. But we do have other options as well, and we do work with employees to try to address those needs.
And that's why none of the goals are 100% too, because we recognize that that car trip is going to be a component of our commuting pattern for quite some time, particularly based on our development patterns.
Thank you very much. For a time check, let me remind everyone we do have a press conference at 12:30 across the street. And with that, Councilmember Reamer.
I'll just be quick, but really appreciated Councilmember Rice's points. I think the reality is that there will always be people for whom driving is the rational choice. They have to drop their kids off and they have to cross town, and the point of this legislation is to reduce the demand for driving from other people so that those who do really need to drive will not have as much traffic on the road, so that 1 hour commute, 1.5 hour commute from Germantown to Bethesda could be not get worse, minimally, if perhaps even improve. Thank you.
Thank you. And there are no other lights. And with that, if you could please call the roll.
Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Jawando?
Yes.
Mr. Jawando votes yes. Mr. Reamer?
Yes.
Mr. Reamer votes yes. Ms. Navarro? Yes. Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Albornoz? Mr. Albornoz votes yes. Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friedson? Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Hucker?
Yes.
Mr. Hucker votes yes. Mr. Katz?
Yes, and that carries unanimously. And with that, we're going to call a recess. We're going to come back in session for public hearings at 1:30 and have an interviews after that as well. Thank you very much.